The story of the land, now at the center of the Israel-Palestine conflict, is a story of layers, of civilizations built one on top of the other, each leaving its mark. To understand the present, we must look to the distant past. Ancient history tells us of various peoples inhabiting this region. The land, known as Canaan, was home to the Canaanites for centuries. Abraham, Moses, Israel, Judah, establishing a deep foundational connection for the Jewish people, etched into stone and scroll. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks under Alexander the Great. The Babylonian conquest in 586 BCE was particularly significant. It led to the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem and the exile of many Jews to Babylon. This event marked the beginning of the Jewish diaspora, a scattering of people who nevertheless maintained a powerful spiritual and cultural connection to their ancestral homeland, a place they continued to call Zion. The Roman Empire's conquest brought another dramatic and violent chapter. Jewish revolts against Roman rule, most notably in 70 CE and 135 CE, were brutally suppressed. The Romans destroyed the Second Temple, a catastrophic event in Jewish history. They renamed the province of Judea to Syria-Palestina, a deliberate attempt to erase the Jewish connection to the land. This renaming is the historical root of the modern name Palestine. The majority of the Jewish population was killed, enslaved, or forced into exile, intensifying the diaspora, though a small Jewish community always remained. Following the decline of the Roman Empire, control continued to change hands. The Byzantine Empire held sway for centuries. Then in the 7th century, Arab armies, united by Islam, conquered the region. They brought the Arabic language and Islam, building mosques on sites held sacred by Jews and Christians, including the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. For the next 1,300 years, the land was predominantly ruled by various Muslim dynasties. Umayyads, Ottomans, and its population became overwhelmingly Arab and Muslim. This long history forms the basis of the deep Palestinian-Arab connection to the land. For nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people lived in diaspora Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. Despite this dispersion, the dream of returning to Zion endured, their ancestral homeland, central to identity and prayer. It wasn't merely spiritual, it was a hope for a physical return. Throughout the centuries, small groups made the difficult journey back, maintaining a continuous, albeit small Jewish presence in the land. However, in the late 19th century, this ancient hope transformed into a modern political movement, Zionism. Driven by rising anti-Semitism in Europe, Zionism called for the re-establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The movement gained momentum, and waves of Jewish immigrants began arriving in Ottoman-controlled Palestine. They purchased land, often from absentee landlords, and established agricultural communities and new towns, like Tel Aviv. This influx began to shift the demographic landscape and, at times, created tensions with the local Arab population. The pivotal moment came during World War I. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, announcing support for a national home for the Jewish people, while also stating that existing non-Jewish civil and religious rights must not be prejudiced. The declaration was celebrated by Zionists, but viewed with alarm by Arab leaders. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and the League of Nations granted Britain a mandate to govern Palestine. The British Mandate period was fraught with conflict. Jewish immigration increased dramatically, especially in the 1930s as Jews fled persecution in Nazi Germany. Arab resistance to this immigration into British rule grew, leading to violent uprisings, most notably the Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939. The British struggled to manage the escalating tensions, proposing various partition plans that were usually rejected by the Arab side. The dream of a homeland was becoming a reality for one people, but it was seen as a catastrophe, the Nakba, by the other. The horrors of the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were systematically murdered by the Nazis, created an overwhelming international consensus that the Jewish people needed a state of their own. In 1947, with Britain unable to resolve the conflict, the issue was turned over to the newly formed United Nations. The UN proposed a partition plan, Resolution 181, which would divide the land into 2 states, one Arab, one Jewish, with Jerusalem to be administered as an international city. The Jewish leadership, though unhappy with the borders, accepted the compromise. However, Arab leaders and the surrounding Arab nations vehemently rejected it. On May 14, 1948, as the British mandate expired, David Ben-Gurion declared the establishment of the State of Israel. The declaration of Israeli independence was immediately met with war. Egypt invaded, Jordan invaded, Syria invaded, Iraq invaded, and Lebanon also invaded. They vowed to destroy the new Jewish state. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War ended in Israeli victory, but at great cost. Israel expanded beyond the UN partition lines. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled. Refugees filled neighboring countries and the remaining West Bank and Gaza. Palestinians call this the Nakba, the catastrophe. It set the stage for decades of unresolved conflict. Core issues like borders, refugees, the status of Jerusalem fueled the ongoing conflict. Over the following decades, multiple two-state proposals were made. Each was rejected. First major rejection, the 1947 UN Partition Plan, rejected mainly by the Arab Higher Committee and the Arab League, who did not recognize any partition and claimed the whole territory. Second, after the 1967 Six-Day War, at the Khartoum Summit, the Arab League responded with 3 no's: no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. Even so, Jordan and Egypt eventually withdrew their claims of sovereignty over the West Bank and Gaza, opening the way for the Camp David Accords of 1978. This way, Israel offered Sinai back to Egypt, re-establishing normal relations between the states, and also signed a peace treaty with Jordan in 1994. The third major chance came at Camp David in 2000. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered Gaza around 94% of the West Bank and East Jerusalem as its capital. Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestinian Authority, rejected the offer. The fourth big chance came in 2008 with Ehud Olmert. Olmert proposed a Palestinian state equivalent to 100% of the West Bank and Gaza via land swaps. He suggested a division of Jerusalem and a symbolic return of a small number of refugees to Israel. Abbas walked away without a counteroffer. These repeated rejections, for many complex reasons, bred deep pessimism on both sides. In that climate of stalled talks and ongoing occupation, Hamas emerged. Hamas was founded in 1987 during the First Intifada. Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement. Its charter called for the destruction of Israel and an Islamic state over historic Palestine. Unlike the secular Palestine Liberation Organization, Hamas blended nationalism with militant Islamism. The group gained popularity by providing social services, schools and clinics in impoverished areas. But it also carried out brutal suicide bombings and attacks on Israeli civilians. That record led many countries, including the United States and the European Union, to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. For decades, Israel maintained a military presence and civilian settlements in the Gaza Strip. However, in 2005, Ariel Sharon decided to withdraw. The disengagement dismantled all 21 Jewish settlements. About 9,000 Israeli residents were forcibly evacuated. The Israeli military also withdrew its ground forces. One of the most charged phrases in the entire conflict is the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." For many Palestinians and their supporters, this is a call for liberation, justice, and the establishment of a secular democratic state where all can live as equals. It is seen as an aspirational chant for an end to occupation and apartheid. In this interpretation, free means free from Israeli military control, free from checkpoints, free from blockades, free from settlements, conditions that define life for many Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. It is presented as a call for human rights and self-determination. However, for most Israelis and many in the Jewish community worldwide, the phrase has a far more sinister meaning. They hear it as a direct call for the eradication of the State of Israel. The river is the Jordan River, and the sea is the Mediterranean Sea, geographically encompassing the entire state of Israel. Groups like Hamas Palestinian Islamic Jihad, whose official charters call for Israel's destruction, use this phrase precisely in that context. For Israelis, who live in a small country surrounded by historical adversaries, this is not an abstract political statement. It is an existential threat. It negates the very idea of a two-state solution and invokes a future where the world's only Jewish state ceases to exist. This fundamental disagreement over the meaning of a single phrase highlights the vast chasm of perception that separates the two sides. What the future will hold, we may never know for sure, but in the light of the last developments in the region, the ceasefire in Gaza and the involvement of the U.S. President Donald Trump, committed to end the war, we may finally hope for long-lasting peace in the Middle East. If you found this presentation useful, please like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content.